Hey guys, Jason here with a word to the wise. It's been a while. I just want to touch on some stuff I saw on my calendar. Tomorrow is the 13th, and it is the beginning of Purim. Now, here again, I'm not saying I have some sort of insight or inside knowledge. I am just saying, seeing what has been happening in that timepiece land. When you read the story of Esther, where it speaks on Purim's creation, what they were allowed to do after they had brought Haman out and had his 10 sons killed, and they killed 500 more in the land that the 10 sons were in, and then they went to other towns and they kept on. In Susa they killed 300. And here in verse 16 of chapter 9, now let the rest of the Jews who are in the king's province also gather to defend their lives, and got relief from their enemies, and killed 75,000 of those who hated them, but they laid no hands on the plunder. So interesting, over the last couple of years, how people have been speaking out and against the timepiece land. Now, here as Christians, we're not saying that we're against anybody. Obviously our enemies are lost and are more than likely deceived, or truly just have hatred in them. Even in, I think it's 2 Peter's chapter 3, it's hoping that those people will come to a repentance before the day of the Lord comes. That way, as many can be saved. Now, again, I watch a lot of different channels. I try to watch, I try not to sign in sometimes and just see what pops up. And then the channels that I even subscribe to, I'm going to mention Rise, because Rise speaks and shows a lot of, he just mirrors a lot of news programs and happenings that are happening, fires and things that are happening in the Middle East, and protests and things like that. And I never watch all of them because he mirrors the entire thing, and it could be hours long, but just a very interesting look sometimes at those things. And when people are speaking about Magog, I see that a lot on these kind of mega churches, and people that are kind of associated with those pastors that have their own little private shows that are very large, and they bring those mega church pastors in, and they all kind of go over the same thing and share the same information with a lot of people. One thing that hit me just minutes ago was people that are speaking on Magog. And whenever you watch those kind of things where they talk about Lush and Put and the land of Magog, they always, of course, they associate, the old Persian Empire land and what it is today, being Iran. But they always point to Russia being part of this whole thing, and look what Russia's doing. Yet when I watched a couple weeks back, I put it up on a video, and it was people in the timepiece land saying that the U.S. is going to be supporting in stopping Iran, would be the best way I'm going to put it here. So I'm trying to keep this as delicate and as concise as I can here. But why is then Russia, which is much larger and has been doing, fighting in Ukraine, why has nobody kind of said, well, look, there is part of Magog making its way through the countryside, or, what's next is going to be on Magog's list? I don't know, I just found that very peculiar that nobody kind of, as much as they want to stop Iran from being a nuclear power, Russia's already a nuclear power. And I think it's been said that they have just as many, or if not more, nuclear warheads than we are supposed to have, if nuclear warheads are even real. If it's just some sort of like a power grab, for the psyche. And people will say, oh, well, we've seen the testing in the black and white videos in the past, and we've seen them do that here and there and in space. And you know what? I've seen some explosions like the Lebanon dock. You can compare that with, I've seen people who put pictures up side by side with Hiroshima and the mushroom cloud that put off next to what happened on the dock with just some chemicals. And they're very, 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 very similar in size. So to say that, we have something larger, who can say? Who can prove it? Who wants to prove it, Yet all these people say that they have these things, but yet they know what consequences it could bring if they use something like that. Yet they have numbers of them. It's like, well, if you're so sure of having it and you could use it at any time against an enemy, couldn't you use it against all your enemies? And so that's how it goes. And one last thing I'll touch on that with the thought of it is people were showing, and I think it was on Joe Rogan, and it's something that I've said also. It's like you watch when they did those original tests in the desert in America and they built up towns and houses and things like that. A guy was showing how one of the blasts was happening, and beforehand, and then when the blast was coming, right before it hits, you see a car all of a sudden appears in the background, and then the blast hits, and it's like the car wasn't there, but then right before the blast hits, it cuts, and the car is there, and the house and the car get blown away. He's like, and then nothing ever affects the film, the radiation. The camera doesn't even shake when the million-pound blast is, million-ton blast is passing. Like, did you have some sort of a super gyro suspension system? So it's just, again, I'm not trying to say I have proof of anything, but I feel that since nobody's ever seen one in our many generations, that to say that it's real versus just having a lot of explosives go off at one time. But the people that are looking for Magog and the Christians that are kind of calling it out as well, always reading into Ezekiel 38, yet never referring to, well, this might be exactly what was being prophesied in Revelation 20 and Ezekiel 38. Both are speaking about the same land, the same people. Why is it not prophecy being revealed in Revelation? That's what the prophets were doing. And again, when you look at the prophets, the books, the papers, the amount of, let's see. All these pages here are all the prophecies from the prophets, not to mention Kings and Samuel and Chronicles and the books of Moses. All of those have prophecies as well. So, man, my shoulder is just itching like crazy. So I'm just saying, it's something to consider. It's something to look at. Why? Also in this time period, we're seeing how, like I've said in the past, how when the next president comes, if Trump gets in versus Harris, what would happen, and it's exactly what's happening, is all these switches are being thrown, just turning everything on, making things look better. But I'm not saying it's not going to happen, but I haven't seen the prices go down in gas. I haven't seen the prices go down in groceries. But what are they talking about instead? Somehow giving us tax reductions. which will put more money in our accounts, but the money will still be going to all these mega businesses that are going to be collecting our money. And how is that money getting redistributed back into our system? Is it at all? Are we just printing money and just to give it to the people just so they can spend it and give it all to these mega corporations? And especially if we're dealing with China, over the last however many years we've been dealing with, all the Chinese goods, things being made there since the Clinton era, where a lot of companies went. It's interesting to see, how much money went out and how much money came back in. Not to mention all the debt that they buy of America and how much stuff they bought in America, land and that kind of things. People point out Gates buying all this farmland, but nobody knows how much stuff that China really owns. And not to mention, you could also have fronts that are just buying up stuff with Chinese money, and they're like, okay, well, you just put your name on it, but we own it. You're working for us. We own you, blah, blah, blah. Not saying that that's happening, but it'd be a pretty easy way, I'm sure, to just do anything. So I'll leave it at that. Just a word to the wise. I wanted to kind of touch base with you guys. And whenever Purim comes around, it's like, if something happens on this time, it'd be very interesting. And whenever I look at the second beast in Revelations, I guess I got a little more to go on here, so hang on. So the second beast, and it performs great signs, making fire come down from heaven to earth in front of people. And by the signs that it was allowed to work in the presence of the beast, it deceived those who dwell on the earth, telling them to make an image for the beast that was wounded by the sword and yet lived. So that's just verse 14 in chapter 13. And what always gets me is they were deceived in that moment, in that time. And what does Revelation 20, the 1,000 years past, verse 9, and they marched over the broad plains of the earth and surrounded the camp of the saints, the beloved city, but fire came down from heaven and consumed them, and the devil who had deceived them was thrown into the lake of fire and sulfur, where the beast and the false prophet are. So this is where fire comes down from God to protect that city. But in that chapter 13, they are deceived by what comes down from heaven. So it would be interesting when this time happens in chapter 13, that what will it be? Will it be some sort of like a blimp with some sort of lasers on it, flamethrowers, dropping flaming bombs or something, fire coming down from the heavens, planes? Oh, look, we were in danger, and then America came and saved us from our enemies, and they bombed the tar out of them, and it was prophecy happening as God had said it would happen. Just an idea. Is that what's going to happen? I'm not saying I know. Just saying, in the future, it's something to keep in your pocket to remember, because many out there will probably say that this is prophecy happening. Where they'll point, who knows? I'll leave it at that. Just a word to the wise, guys. God bless.